Rise and shine, campers, and welcome back to Camp Quest. The Lorcana meta has been rejuvenated with the ban of both Hiram Flaversham and Fortisphere. It feels like a whole bunch of new decks have become more viable and opened back up. So today we're going to be running through a couple Amethyst Steel decks, which I believe is one of the color combinations that is going to benefit the most from the two bans to both Hiram and the Fortisphere, as we see some of those Sapphire decks come down to earth from being the lone tier 0 decks. So I'm going to run through 3 decks here. Amethyst Steel is a deck type that I have been, or color combination that I have been testing a lot of, and there are a couple different prominent decks out there right now that you can find if you're searching on Dreamborn in the trending or either in the popular versions from some very good Lorcana players. But you're always welcome to make your own decks as well. That's always highly encouraged. But I think what we want to highlight here with these Amethyst Steel decks, a lot of them are somewhere between, I would say, aggro and mid-range, even tempo, depending on how you're curving out your turns, or if you're playing multiple 1-drops on turn 2, or if you really are trying to kind of curve out and getting into that 5 and 6 range and dropping some more mid-range options. But no matter how you slice it, Amethyst Steel seems to have been performing pretty well even prior to the bans to Hiram and Fortisphere, because of some of the instantaneous lore that you get from the characters when they come down. Now, what we're going to see as we go through these 3 decks, and I will be sure to highlight the content creators here and drop the links below for these 3 decks so you can see, so you can find them easier in the deck notes of the video. What we're going to see as we go through these 3 decks is a slight variation in, one, the card draw options in which this deck is refilling the hand as it's playing units on the board, but 2, some of the guaranteed lore options on the board. I think these are high to of note here, just because that is kind of the way in which this deck seems to be winning. It's just if you can undeniably slam units on the board that are gaining you that instantaneous lore. I mean, it's no secret that all of the Merlin Goat package, with being able to drop a Merlin Goat and recall it, that was always really popular in the Amethyst Ruby decks, or just really Amethyst decks in general. If your opponent gets to like 15 lore, you're like, okay, I need to be aware of what happens if they play a goat and then they can bounce it back. They've almost got this undeniable lore in hand that I can't do anything back. Well, with the addition of Giant Cobra, Ghostly Serpent to the Amethyst Steel decks in particular, because you have to play Amethyst Steel if you're going to play Giant Cobra, that you can gain that. There's another option to gain instantaneous lore by just playing this unit on board. So it's almost become a defining unit for this deck type. And while I did say at the beginning of the season, I didn't think that the Vanish cards were going to be very good in general, Giant Cobra kind of stood alone in that it has its own standalone value and it doesn't require you to play other Vanish units to gain, or the other illusion units to gain that value. So first, let's go through King Lou's version here, which I see he updated not more than a couple days ago. We're running a pretty solid early package here with both the Chernobog Followers, Diablo, and Magic Broom Illuminary Keeper. All 12 of those 1-drops can draw you additional cards if and they're not banished before you can draw them. Diablo Obedient Raven is going to draw you the card regardless if your opponent banishes it with an action or not. Chernobog's Followers and Magic Broom, you kind of need to be able to banish under your own conditions. But we're going to see these trio of 1-drops as a recurring theme amongst all of the decks that we're going to review here. Where we start to kind of deviate here is in turns 2 through 4, or units 2 through 4. This deck in particular is running 3 of Honeymare, North Uldra Guide. Now, this is almost a very flavorful card, but it's not everyone believes it, I don't think. You'll see this card is not a staple or not a mainstay from this new set in all of the decks that we're going to review. Honeymare says when you play this character, if your opponent has an exerted character in play, gain 1 lore. So unlike some of the other cards like Giant Cobra or Goat, or even the White Rose, there still is a requirement to Honeymare gaining you that 1 additional instantaneous lore, with your opponent needing to have an exerted character. So it doesn't necessarily, it's almost like halfway there into that category. If you don't believe that Honeymare is going to get you the value enough because your opponent is going to be smartly playing around it or trading into you, not leaving units unexerted, then maybe Honey Marin isn't going to be worth your time. It's only a two cost 2/2. And you see that quite often as a stat line for one cost characters as well. So it's not a great stat line. It's only questing for one every other time. But it does serve a particular purpose in this deck. Madam M Snake for the bounce. Calhoun definitely gets a lot more value in these Amethyst Steel decks as kind of like a punish unit. It's also a really good unit to play if you're going second, or playing on the draw, as they call it. It's probably your most ideal 2-drop to find, just because it does punish them questing with a 1-drop, your opponent, and probably lives that trade too. Unless it is a bell, a Sapphire Bell that they've bounced with an item, which they have a lot less of a chance now doing now that Fortisphere is banned. Doc is probably the most consistent card from a card draw perspective that you're going to see in all these decks. However, you'll notice that King Lu is only running one of them, which makes this deck even more unique. That he's like, basically what King Lu is saying is, I don't want to ever find 2 Docs in my hand at the same time. And I want to be able to control playing a Doc, bouncing it with the Snake, and then having it in my hand to then be able to play another Doc. Mr. Smee, still one of the best 2-drops in the game. Giant Cobra, Ghostly Serpent. I've mentioned this card already, but it's a new card. When you play this character, you may choose and discard a card that gains 2 lore. Fox, still a staple. Now, what's interesting to me here is this card as a flex, Benja. Now, I have been really high on Benja. DBN and I have talked a lot about this, or Ian. Ian and I have talked a lot about Benja, and Ian's kind of opinion on Benja is that overall it's not a great card. The stat line isn't impressive for a 3-drop. It does quest for 2, but it's almost a card that and I agree with him, it's almost a card that you play out of necessity or as a reaction, somewhere between a 1-of and a 3-of in a deck, when items are out of control and you almost have to have it as a response to allow yourself as a mid-range or a tempo deck or an aggro deck to stay in the game and not just automatically lose to a high-value item that you can't do anything about, like a Lucky Dime or like a Maurice's Workshop or something like that. So Benja still may be worth the inclusion in a version that you're going to play, but I think it is a tech option at best currently. But we'll need to see the power level of the item decks going forward with the removal of Fortisphere and no longer the card draw consistency that Flaversham provides. Pete, Games Referee, almost included in every Amethyst Steel deck, but the number of copies of Pete seem to be varying as well. Lou's only playing 3 here, where most decks, I would venture, are still playing 4, because shutting down an opponent to be able to play any actions on a turn, when you know they're kind of hitting those major breakpoints, like for a Be Prepared, which we do expect to see Ruby Amethyst resurge, just because there's going to be a little bit more time for those other control decks to get back online. Or Steel Song. Steel Song is another deck that is anticipated to take a step forward here. So being able to shut down a Whole New World or a high removal option like an Along Came Zeus or a Strength of a Raging Fire with a Pete on a prior turn is going to be really, really important. Genie's Supportive Friend is probably the most interesting inclusion in King Lu's version. It's a card draw option, but it is going to lose you that unit really quickly. Interestingly enough, what you'll notice he's not playing the other Genie, the 4-drop Evasive Genie that draws you a card when you play it. Merlin Goat, 4 copies. And what King Lu is doing here, he's focusing a little bit more on these actions down here. Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom for guaranteed lore. He's saying, I want to be able to draw this card and play guaranteed lore. This Is My Family is almost a card draw cycle. And if you're interested in why this card is included here, go ahead and read when you go and look at this deck, read the description over here on the right-hand side that he provides. This Is My Family is basically, hey, if my unit is going to quest for 1 anyway, I might as well sing this song with a 2-cost unit, like a Honey Marin, which I mentioned earlier has a reason that they're in this deck, or a Calhoun. Honey Marin and Calhoun or Snake are only going to quest for 1 anyway, so I might as well sing This Is My Family, gain the lore that they would have gotten from questing anyway, and cycle This Is My Family and draw an additional card. Especially if you plan on playing all of your ink on that turn, then it's good just to be able to cycle the card and either give yourself another card to ink or just give you another option to play for that turn. You're going to want to do this at the beginning. a couple copies of Frenzy on the other side for card draw, for singing, and then Amethyst Chromacon being a major fuel for card draw here that maybe some of the other decks aren't running. If you're playing Amethyst Chromacon, you're essentially saying, I don't care if my opponent draws cards. I want to draw the cards, and I'm going to make better use of them than my opponent can. So an interesting take here from King Lou. JDRR, we're going to go ahead and move over to the second deck here. You'll notice a lot more of a concise list here, a lot cleaner. A 4x15, as we like to call it. There's nothing less than three copies in a deck here. It's kind of cool when we get to see such a consolidated list because there's a commitment to all of the cards in the deck. That same 1-drop package, you're still seeing Smee. You're seeing 4 copies of Calhoun here. Just because there's less uninkables that this deck is wanting to play. So you're seeing, we want to see Calhoun more often. And like I said, it's a really good 2-drop to play if you are going second, just because it is a shutdown card. We're committing to 4 copies of Doc here. We're going to say we're going to play out units onto the board, and Doc is going to be my refill, and we are just going to have to work through the scenarios where we find multiple Docs in hand. Still have Smee, still have Giant Cobra, still have Fox, still have White Rose. We're seeing a commitment to Crab, so we need to be able to challenge a little harder on board and take out some bigger units. Probably buffing up a Calhoun that does want to challenge in order to get that lore value and that lore gain, or a Diablo that is going to draw me a card regardless, but I might as well buff it up by 3 with Merlin Crab and take a unit out like a Bell on turn 3 if they decide to quest with it and going, if they quest with their Bell because you have a Diablo on board, they're going, I'm safe, this Diablo is not going to be able to take out my Bell, or this Magic Broom isn't going to be able to take out my Bell. You slap a Crab on board, you trade up to them, and now you've got a little bit more board control. White Rose for the guaranteed lore. 4 Pete Games Referee. We're going to deny cards as much as possible. And here's the additional genie I was talking about, the other genie that I would expect to see more often, which is the Wish Fulfilled evasive 2/4 evasive that quests for 2 and draws you the cards, so guaranteed cards off of the genie. 4 Goats, 4 Elsa Fifth Spirit. So another card that is committing a little heavier to playing to the board. And it is another evasive unit, so if your opponent doesn't have the ability to deal with evasives, then Elsa's really good. This is also seems like a little bit of a response to maybe this deck is reading into a higher discard meta. Elsa is one of the best cards for being able to shut down Diablos or shut down other genies in return. If we expect a higher count of Amethyst decks and more genies to be able to play, then playing your own genie, we're almost back to set 6 meta, right? If you're playing your own genie, then you can drop an Elsa to exert their genie and double challenge, and both of yours live. Elsa gains a lot of value there. And then 4 copies of Strength of a Raging Fire to be able to clear with some actions and some go wide. If you're going wide on the board, be able to clear some bigger units and not lose any of your board tempo. So a pretty clean list here. We're seeing that this was updated not more than a day or two, or yesterday morning. So I think this is a meta read. We're still early in the post-ban meta from Hiram and Fortisphere. We don't really know where the dust is going to settle and what is really going to emerge as the top decks to beat, but this deck is making a read that discard is going to be a problem and that we need to be able to challenge a little heavier on board and take out units before they can get bigger and better value. The last list that we are going to take a look at, goodness words, is Poisonous's list, which you can see was also updated yesterday evening. So we're recording this video at a pretty dang good time. Now this list deviates in the 1-drop package where we're only playing Chernobog's Followers and Diablo, and he's dropping off the Magic Broom, which I do agree, amongst the 3 1-drops, Magic Broom is probably the least important. So if you are going to trade out, if you still want to play those 10 to 12 1-drops and you're going to sacrifice one of them, it's probably worth dropping off the Magic Broom. Chernobog's Followers, Diablo Obedient Raven, and Robin Hood Beloved Outlaw. Now this is because we're playing the Robin Hood Champion of Sherwood shift option on 3, which becomes a really big body, gives us almost the same thing as the Calhoun, gives us the ability to gain 2 lore off of the challenges, and becomes pseudo card draw if they return and banish the Robin Hood in a challenge, then you get to draw a card off of it. If we see a heavier Steel Song meta, Robin Hood maybe won't get the additional value as often of being able to draw you the card off of being banished, because it's most likely that it's going to get cleared with the song. Or if we're just seeing a lot of steel decks in general, almost every steel deck is running Strength of a Raging Fire at this point. A lot of them are still running with the Storm Rage on. So Robin Hood very often might get cleared via an action, which you won't draw the card off of. But still, threatening to gain 2 lore off of a challenge banish multiple times from the same unit is a really good threat. Doc, Bold Knight, we're playing 2 copies, so a middle ground approach of I don't want to see multiple Docs in my hand. We're still playing Smee, Giant Cobra, Metamim Fox, 2 Crabs, so still saying we want to compete a little bit on board and buff up some units, but we're not going to commit 4 slots to it. 4 Pete, 4 Genie Wish Fulfilled, 2 Goat. So not necessarily saying that I need to see all of that guaranteed lore. You'll also notice that this list isn't playing any Honey Marins, and it's also not playing the White Rose. So we're a little dialed back on some of the guaranteed lore cards. We still have the Calhoun. We've added the addition of the Robin Hood. We've got a couple goats in there, but we're not playing all of the guaranteed lore cards. So this is tending to a little bit more of a board-centric mid-range version, where the prior 2 versions that we just took a look at are more aggressive, kind of undeniable lore gain decks. We still got our Elsa 5th Spirit. Fire the Cannons for some early game pressure, or early game clear. This seems like a deck that is responding to a read that we're going to see more aggressive decks. Something like the Trampabog, as I've heard it called, or the Lemon Lime aggressive decks that's playing Tramp and a really go wide strategy with just high defense, low attack, but I'm going to quest with a bunch of units and then try to get a Chernabog out. So those type of decks, this is going to fare well into, because you're going to have the Madam Mim Fox for bounce, a couple Crabs for some buff, but we're going to be able to gain lore off of the challenges. And then a couple copies of Grab Your Swords and the Library for some additional card draw. So that's where we're going to gain all that additional lore for card draw from. Well, those are 3 decks for Amethyst Steel that we may see more of in the coming meta. Let us know what you guys think down below. Are you playing these decks? Do you have your own version of Amethyst Steel that you think is going to fare well in this post-meta version? Or what other color combinations are you playing with? All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one.